Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is still Victor Shi. It is Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. It's the last day of January, which is hard to imagine. Donald Trump might be running for president again, and he might be the front runner at this point, but he still faces a series of investigations into him on both the federal and state and local levels. What is the state of the Trump investigations? Are we any closer to any form of accountability? What should we be paying attention to? Hugo Lowell, who is a reporter for The Guardian, is going to join me shortly to talk about the latest that we have regarding all of the Trump investigations. We'll get into all of those with him shortly. But before he joins, I just want to talk about some of the news that we've seen since yesterday. The first is, as you know, we all actually yesterday I talked to Brittany Packnett-Cunningham about what we're seeing out of Memphis with Tyre Nichols and this sustained culture of police brutality and violence. And yesterday, right after we got off air, a sixth police officer was relieved of duty for his failure to act when Tyre Nichols was basically being beaten to death by these police officers. And as you might remember, one of the things that we saw during that video footage was there were 5 main police officers who were beating Tyre Nichols, but there were at least 3 others at the time who were just standing around, not offering any assistance, not making any phone calls to get aid or anything like that. And so yesterday they made that decision to relieve the 6th officer from his position at the Memphis Police Department, which I think is important, which I think is good. I think it's much needed accountability, but still, we were talking yesterday about how you can't just get rid of the bad apples. There has to be this systemic change. And then later last night, we saw that the fire department in Memphis, Tennessee, relieved 3 fire department officials from their duties for their first inaction to act or their lack of ability to properly treat Tyre Nichols. And so you're seeing, I think, a lot of movement from some of the actors involved in the Tyre Nichols situation. And I just hope this sends a message to a lot of the people out there who are serving in law enforcement that, yes, there might be good people out there, but if you choose not to act or if you do choose to stand by, there will be consequences for your actions. And so that's something that I think we will all be paying attention to. And there's a lot of developments out of Tennessee right now regarding all of those. The next thing I have is some breaking news out of Capitol Hill. I'm actually right now in DC. And so I'm on Eastern time as opposed to Pacific time, which means that I'm actually getting the news as it comes in rather than sleeping through it in the morning. But right now we see that George Santos was apparently involved in a closed door meeting with House Republicans. And he said in that meeting that he plans to recuse himself from his committees. As we remember, he was a part of 2 committees so far, the Science Committee as well as the Small Business Committee, both of which I think are laughable given George Santos's statements and his supposed credentials. But he said he would recuse himself because there are ethical investigations into him and he wants those to be resolved. Whether or not this is moral, I'm not quite sure, but there seems to be this willingness now from George Santos to take himself out of those committees, which is good for all of us. We don't have to pay attention to George Santos anymore. But I think it's still not enough. I think we have to make sure that we still put pressure on George Santos to resign from his position, because someone who lies about his resume, who lies about his background, I think is undeserving of serving in the highest legislative body in the nation. And there was also a new poll that came out this morning that showed 71% of Republicans, again, that's 71% of Republicans are calling on George Santos to resign. That's a new CBS poll that came out this morning. So it's not just Democrats who want George Santos to resign. It's also Republicans. And so you're seeing this bipartisan effort from both Democrats and Republicans to make sure that George Santos, someone who lied about many parts of his resume, his background, his identity, if not every single part of his background, resume, and identity, to step away from his position. We just want good, responsible, principled people in government, and George Santos is not one of them. A bit of sad news that we saw late last night out of Florida was another shooting. As all of us are well aware, because we live in America, there's been this series of shootings in just 2023 alone. There's been over 45 mass shootings since the start of 2023, 4 of which happened in where I currently live, California. Started with Monterey Park and then went all the way down to this past weekend with Beverly Hills. And you're seeing this continued pattern of mass shootings happen across the country. It's really sad. It's really devastating. But the latest one in Florida happened in Lakeland, Florida. And at least 10 people were wounded so far. two in critical condition. And so all of our thoughts and prayers go out to Florida. But, I feel almost guilty saying thoughts and prayers because we've said it so many times it's become numb. And we can't let down our guard in this fight to reform our nation's gun laws. And we have to treat it with the urgency, with the seriousness it deserves. Later today, in the other show I co-host with Jill Wine-Banks, we'll be talking to a few people, including Mayor Nancy Rotering from Highland Park, where there was a mass shooting on July 4th, Jackie Spear, who used to represent the Half Moon Bay district, as well as Representative Jan Schakowsky about our nation's gun laws and what it'll take to reform our nation's gun laws on not just the federal level, but also on the state and local levels, because it seems like with Republicans now at the helm in the House, there doesn't seem to be much movement regarding where we are going on that. So I think we're going to have to take our efforts to the states and to our local governments if the House Republicans do not act. But this is, again, another concerning thing for our entire country. We have young people, especially, who have to go through mass shooter drills, who have to live through this reality of, fearing whether or not we can go to school safely. And then, across the country, people are wondering whether or not they can go to movies, whether or not they can go to festivals, parades, church safely without the fear of, being shot down. And it's a reality that's uniquely American compared to every other country in America. This is a uniquely American problem that really puts us in an embarrassing position on the global stage. And so I hope Republicans realize that, but I don't think they have any shame or embarrassment in them, as we saw just a few weeks ago with Kevin McCarthy's battle to become speaker. We've talked about ChatGPT a little bit on this show and how there's some concerning things regarding ChatGPT. It's a promising AI tool, which is artificial intelligence, but there's also some really concerning things like, students basically asking ChatGPT to write whole essays for them. And there's this one movement from this one person out of Princeton. His name is Edward Tien, and he's a Princeton senior right now, originally from Canada, Toronto, Canada. And he basically spent his winter break building an alternative to ChatGPT. And basically, he built this detector for professors and teachers, especially, called ChatGPT Zero. And it's, according to Edward, this app that can quickly and efficiently detect whether an essay is ChatGPT or human written. So that's, I found, was interesting, and hopefully we can detect that. And I'm told that Hugo Lowell is here with us. And so I'm going to bring on Hugo. Hugo, it's great to see you. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's get started talking about the Trump investigations. There are so many that we can touch on, but I want to start off with MarALago. So what can you tell us about what's happening vis-a-vis the MarALago investigation right now?
Yeah, there's still a lot of activity actually in the grand jury investigation in the Trump documents case. Just last night, we learned through CNN, and I confirmed to my own reporting actually, that the two people who did the search of Trump's storage unit in December, where they found two classified documents, they actually got brought before the federal grand jury hearing evidence in Washington about that case. And so I think there's still a lot going on. I think the thing to remember, though, with the MarALago case is it's less about those two additional documents that were found and more about the obstructive kind of pattern of behavior back in May and June, when kind of DOJ was trying to get these documents back from Trump, and also the fact that he had commingled documents that were classified in his desk drawer with documents that were not classified but post-dated after his presidency in that same drawer, right? If you're the Justice Department and you're trying to build a case to say Trump willfully retained national security information or classified documents, you have to show that he knew he was holding on to these documents. And so you go into something like the desk drawer and say, well, you had these papers there kind of put together with the classified stuff. So you must have known, or you should have known, that you had these classified documents. So something like that is really central to the case. And I think we're going to see more activity around that.
Right. I just want to take a step back for a second. I think there's a lot of people out there, especially my peers, who wonder, what is the significance of presidents or really any elected officials taking classified documents with them? And I want you to explain to people watching and listening, why is it so important that we're focusing on, what Trump and Biden and Vice President Mike Pence did regarding the classified documents, and what distinguishes maybe Trump from what Biden and former Vice President Mike Pence did?
Well, I think it's significant because it's a national security problem, right? You have these documents that are really, really sensitive. I mean, in Trump's case, Some of the documents that he was suspected to have were kind of at the SAP or Special Access Program level. That's stuff that's really central to the national security. Things like the foreign the capabilities of foreign adversaries, like military technologies, things like nuclear programs, and including for Biden, he also appears to have had documents classified at the TS-SCI level, which is the kind of top secret compartmented information level. Again, very, very sensitive documents. And so the primary concern for the Justice Department and the national security agencies is we don't want these documents to be in an unsecure place where foreign adversaries or kind of agents of foreign adversaries might be able to access them. We call it spillage. And it's all about trying to stem spillage because we don't want those secured information to get out to people who are unauthorized to see it. But I think, as you say, there are very different circumstances to both the Biden case and the Trump case. For Biden, he had these documents in his office in Washington and his house in Delaware, but he returned them as soon as his lawyers found them, and that's the correct thing to do, right? If you look at the way that the Justice Department has typically investigated mishandling of classified documents, it's not criminal unless the defendant or the target in question meets one of or a combination of four what we call aggravating factors. One is disloyalty to the United States. Second is obstruction of justice. Third is a volume of material sufficient to draw an inference of misconduct. And number four is if there was evidence of willful retention and a refusal to hand it back to an authorized officer of the United States. And so in Trump's case, he basically meets two, if not three of those cases, right? I mean, he had 101 classified documents or documents that were marked classified seized by the FBI when they came down to MarALago. And before that, he returned to the Justice Department like additional documents with classification markings. So there is sufficient volume there in a way that, for instance, we don't see with the Biden case.
Is the key difference between Trump and Biden, and also maybe Biden and Pence, is it that Trump basically obstructed the ability to, take in the documents? Is that a correct way of understanding the difference, the key difference at least?
I think it makes sense to try and think about these in like aggravating factors, because that's really that's the technical standard that the Justice Department uses. I mean, if you look at each of them, I think to answer your question, you can think of it like obstruction and like willful retention, but like there are elements here, right? The principal charge here is, or the principal statute that appears to have been violated with Trump is the willful retention. Yeah. He had these documents, he was commingling these classified documents with non-classified stuff in his office. No evidence of that with Biden. Yeah. With the sheer number of documents, Trump had hundreds upon hundreds of sensitive government documents. Biden maybe had a few dozen at most. And then, of course, the obstruction. And this is, I think, what is very central to the Trump case is, yes, there were multiple efforts by the Justice Department to recover these documents. There was, the National Archives trying to get these documents back. There was the Justice Department, issuing a subpoena, a grand jury subpoena to say you have to return any documents, regardless of they're classified, right, if they have classified markings on them. So even if you declassified them, you have to return them because that's what the subpoena demands. And he didn't fully comply with that. And then, of course, down the line, there has been a back and forth with his lawyers. His lawyers haven't always been the most cooperative. And so I think the Justice Department takes a very dim view of what they call an obstructive pattern of behavior. But most importantly, Trump did not fully comply with the grand jury subpoena, and that has not been the case for either Biden or Pence.
Yeah, so I have one last question regarding the MarALago investigation, also maybe just the special counsel that we have set up. So there's Robert Hur for Biden and Jack Smith for Trump. Is there any speculation based off of your reporting about whether or not the appointment of Robert Hur for Biden will in any way impact what's happening with Jack Smith?
It's a good question. I think to some degree it will. Not because the two special counsels are working together or they share teams or there is some sort of like collusion. Simply because one of the charging decisions will come first. I guess it's possible that Merrick Garland says, special counsels you have to announce at the same time, but that would be highly unusual. And in fact, would I think actually violate the special counsel regulations. So my guess or my kind of reporting suggests one of the decisions will come out first. If the Biden documents decision comes out first and Robert Hur is expected not to, recommend criminal charges against Biden, not least because you can't indict a sitting president, that will inform how Jack Smith, the special counsel in the Trump case, will proceed. Because when prosecutors and the Justice Department and the special counsel decide on whether to bring charges, they draw up internally what's called a prosecution memo or a pros memo. And in the prosecution memo, they outline all the facts of the case, and they outline, why they think or which charges were violated. And at the end, they also include this part about potential defenses. And it gets kind of circulated among members of the team who weren't on, that specific element of the case. It gets circulated to the Deputy Attorney General's office. It gets circulated to the Attorney General's office. And that is there to be like, look, do we have a watertight case that will not only bring an indictment and a conviction, but will be sustained in the event of appeal? And so, one of the defenses might be, for instance, the Trump lawyers pointing to the Biden case and trying to make equivocations. And, for instance, with like the retention side, because they'll be like, well, you're prosecuting us, but you're not prosecuting Biden. They'll make that case to a jury, is my guess. And so the Justice Department has to think very hard about how they present these cases. And I'm sure a declination decision in the Biden case will affect the prosecution memo and the kind of investigative strategies in the Trump case.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on that. Let's shift briefly to talk about the Department of Justice's denial of the House Judiciary Committee's request for confidential information into the special counsel investigation for Biden. Talk to us about what you know so far about that and what that means or what that sets up for the relationship between the Republican-controlled Congress and the Department of Justice.
Yeah, look, the Justice Department has a long-standing policy of not essentially turning over confidential information from active, ongoing investigations to Congress. And that is because they're trying to avoid even the appearance of conflict or the appearance of undue influence from Congress on these kind of criminal investigations. Now, it's not clear that the Biden documents case is a criminal investigation. Yes, there's a special counsel investigating it, but it's not clear that it's a criminal investigation looking especially at Biden. So it's not clear that this is a grand jury investigation. In that sense, they might not be violating grand jury secrecy rules, but I think the Justice Department is quite right to say, look, these are the kinds of documents you're requesting, the kinds of details about the investigation that you House Republicans want might reveal the roadmap of our investigation and might inadvertently lead to leaks to potential defendants that would make charging decisions harder for us. Because if you reveal the roadmap, if you reveal kind of the strengths and weaknesses of the Justice Department's case, that really gives kind of defense attorneys a real insight into how the prosecution or potential prosecution might work, and that undermines these criminal cases. So the Justice Department effectively said in a letter yesterday, there is no way we're going to provide you with these documents that you want, and you're really going to probably have to sue us to get it. And typically the courts have sided with the Justice Department on this. It's all one big federal family, and the courts typically have been deferential to the Justice Department's ability to continue investigations and not to turn this over to Congress. If the investigations weren't open and they were closed, Congress typically gets details about that, but certainly not during an ongoing investigation.
Right. So in the remaining minutes that we have left, I need to ask about Georgia, because last week, Fani Willis, who is the district prosecutor down in Georgia, basically said that charges are imminent. Any idea on when that'll happen regarding charges?
It's a very good question. One might say it's like the $1 million question, because Fani Willis in the presentment of the special grand jury report hearing said that she expects there to be multiple defendants, and that is a very ominous sign. Yeah. The word on the street is somewhere around 20, but that's again just like kind of defense counsels talking. So it's not clear whether that's based in truth or where that's coming from, but I think it gives you an idea of kind of how serious the Georgia investigation is. There's no indication yet that Trump will be ensnared in a potential indictment in Georgia, but it's certainly, I think, the kind of thing that could jump out at the last minute. Certainly they wouldn't tell Trump lawyers, I think, until the last minute, because the moment you say that and the moment you tell Trump's lawyers, it's obvious that Trump is going to try and counterspin and kind of spin his way, spin a new narrative out before the new grand jury that could actually return indictments in Georgia could be impaneled. And so I think that's what they're worried about. But I think certainly Georgia is looking very ominous for at least Trump's associates, if not Trump himself.
And by 20, you mean February 20, right?
No, I mean like 20 defendants.
Defendants. Oh, wow. Okay. So
we don't have a date. We don't have a date.
Okay,
Fani Willis will either make a declination decision where she declines to prosecute, or she will make a charging decision. It seems abundantly clear she is going to charge people.
Well, if you want to stay up to date with what's happening, please follow Hugo Lowell on Twitter and check out what he writes at The Guardian and reports on. It's really important stuff. Hugo, thanks so much for joining us this morning and giving us an update on all of the Trump investigations.
Thanks, Victor.
Okay, so we will be back tomorrow with another episode of On the Move with with Chairman of the DNC, Jamie Harrison. He'll talk about what Democrats are doing and also what needs to happen in these next few months for Democrats going forward. On Thursday, we'll be having on I guess we'll not be having on anyone. It'll just be me doing an Ask Me Anything series. So if you want to ask me questions, be sure to ask me those in the comment section. We'll get to them and answer your questions. And then on Friday, we'll have on John Harwood from CNN to talk about what journalists and the media need to do. So be sure to tune in to all of those. We'll be back every day from 11 a.m. Eastern time. For 20 minutes, and be sure to join us here on youtube.com/Politicon. Thanks so much, and we will see you tomorrow.